Okay, members, good evening. Good evening to you all. Before we get to the agenda, may I take this opportunity to advise you that we are not expecting the fire alarm to sound tonight. So if it does, please remain seated, and Mrs Matthews, to my right, will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if appropriate. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but to merely ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Before I go on to the agenda, just one item, just a reminder for everybody that we've got the depot visit coming up on this Friday at 1 o'clock. So if you could let your colleagues know, I think we've had quite a good turnout at the moment, so it should be a good day. Thank you. Okay, over to for apologies. Do we have any apologies, please?
We've had apologies from Councillor Powell.
Okay. Thank you. Any substitute members? Nope. Thank you. We haven't got any urgent items. Visiting members? No. Any disclosures from members or officers? Anyone been lobbied on any of the items tonight? No. We've got a part 2 session at the end. As you've probably seen, we've got yellow pages, so we'll be closing the door and turning the microphones off then. Councillor Burton?
Chairman, if I may, I think there are a couple of us on this side under agenda item 7 that would actually like to request that this is taken in public, because we don't really see what information is sensitive. I understand that there are financial matters to consider, but it's nothing any more sensitive than we would discuss under our budget deliberations at full council, for example. So I'd like to propose a motion that we take that publicly.
Okay. Sorry, could you just confirm which item it is you're talking about?
Sorry, I'm talking about item 16, the exempt item on our agenda.
Okay. All I can say is that I've accepted the agenda as it is because I'm chair and I saw it before it came out or when it came out, and obviously this has been sought on legal advice. I'm not a legal expert. Is there anybody who could possibly help me at all? Yeah, I've been advised that we can't really change it because the head of policy has seen the actual report and advised that it should be done in a closed session. So I'm afraid we will have to go with that.
Could I just ask, sorry, who do you mean by head of policy? I'm not entirely clear on what you're meaning by that. And secondly, isn't the reason behind having agenda item 7 so that this committee votes on whether to take something in public or private?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can say you're right. You are. I understand where you're coming from. I'm not. I don't want to argue with you. I'm only saying from experience that when there's companies mentioned and there's money mentioned and there's obviously quotes have been sought on various things, it will become public knowledge if we were doing a public arena, and it would be unfair to the people that are mentioned in the, from a contractual point of view. Yeah, I'll beg your pardon. This Angela Woodhouse would have been the officer. Okay.
In lieu of any present legal advice, then I would like my dissent noted at that because I do believe that's not right.
Right. Okay. Thank you. We go to the minutes, please, of the last meeting. We take them page by page. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. It just reading agenda item number 20, it doesn't appear to sort of document the concern that members, I think, across the committee had as to sort of Heather House remaining open and the concerns we had that maybe the council was sort of giving up on finding long-term solutions and so forth. The only sort of concern that appears to be documented in this is the concern as to the full structural survey, which was a point that I think, if I may say so, Councillor Powell sort of tagged on at the end, as it were.
Right, okay. Mr. Connell will give you an update on that. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. At the last meeting, I did undertake to sort of continue to pursue the treasurer of the Royal British Legion, and I'm pleased to say that they have at last responded, and I think a meeting has now been diarised, hopefully with the two councillors as well. I haven't got the date to hand, unfortunately, but they did respond to a letter that I wrote the day after the last meeting, so that action has been implemented anyway.
Councillor Powell.
Sorry, if I may. I think my point was nothing in terms of the actual sort of follow-up actions and everything, and I appreciate the work that's being done there. My point was that the minutes don't reflect the concern that we had as a committee over those points that I made earlier.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Joy.
Exactly the same item. I agree with what you're saying. I just wondered whether so it's not lost and we know what's happened with the structural survey, whether it can be added on to the next meeting, because by then, if it's in the diary, we might be able to discuss it and know how we're moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we agreed that it would
okay?
come back in October for this committee, didn't we? So
that's fine.
is that okay?
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. And then just over the page, obviously, last page is 5 on that. So is everybody happy? Oh, Councillor Ring, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, it's just a question because I wasn't here last time. Who's Debbie Smith?
Who is?
Debbie Smith.
Councillor Joy can help us out here.
Yes, I'm one of the trustees on Cutbush and Coral. And what happened was, because we are very limited on skills within the trustees, what we were trying to do was advertise for people that maybe had financial skills, housing skills. And this lady came forward, I think she was housing skills. And so the Cutbush and Coral then went to the council and said if there was no one from the members that wished to stand, could this lady take on the appointment? And I think it was that was agreed. Am I right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Ring? Yeah, I queried it myself, and I think a number of us did at the time, but the position was, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So everybody's happy with the minutes for me to sign minutes off? Yeah, thank you. Right then, have we received any petitions at all? We haven't, thank you. We don't have any questions and answers from the public at all? No, we don't, thank you. So to the works programme, everyone. Hasn't changed a lot since last time. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the one notable absence of the Heather House update to come back in October.
Good point.
And on a related note to that, and Councillor Joy has already touched on it, are we going to have at some point, either separately in the committee programme, perhaps an earlier date when it's completed, or with that report in October, the update from the structural survey? I would imagine it would be done long before October, right. So it might be prudent to have that information a little bit before, even if it's just in a briefing note to members perhaps, rather than for any discussion, because no decision presumably will need to be taken immediately. But to have that as soon as possible.
Right, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Anything else from anybody? No? Okay, lovely. Thank you. Right now then, on to item 12, the revenue outturn, allocation of the underspend. Mr Green is going to present this for us.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Last month I reported the underspend for the year ended March 18 to the committee, which across the council as a whole is 185,000. Now, this committee didn't take a particular view on how that underspend should be used, but Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee did do so. And Policy and Resources decided that in fairness to all the committees, everyone should have an opportunity to put forward any ideas that you might have for use of the underspend. Now, because the council has a healthy level of reserves and it achieved its budget for last year, in principle, that money could be spent on specific projects that are identified by the committees. So this report is brought to you so that you have a chance to put forward anything you'd like to propose. The report sets out on page 8 the different options. You can identify any projects that you feel wouldn't otherwise be funded that would benefit from this funding, and that would then go on to Policy and Resources next week to make a final decision. You could simply decide that the money should be transferred to revenue reserves, so the money would still be there for use as and when necessary in the future. Or option 3, you could simply decide not to make any recommendation. So those are the options that are in front of you, and I know that one specific option has been put forward, which is described in the bit of paper in front of you. I don't know, Chairman, whether you want to call the office to talk about that.
Yeah, sorry members, you should have received an A4 paper this evening, some of you regarding a low emissions zone. Okay. Councillor Ring.
Well, I suppose we should all say we've been lobbied, because there's no signature on the bottom of this piece of paper. So I don't know who wrote it, whether it was a councillor, whether it was an officer. I do not know. So that's one thing. The second thing is, in all the time I've been a councillor, even though we've had the papers, managers have always been given the opportunity to write something like this. And I don't see anything from anybody else. So what have I got to do? Sit here and guess? That's all I can say. Not happy.
Hopefully, things will come to light in a minute. I understand your concern, etc. Because when I noticed that the underspend went to HCL and then PNR and then came back again, basically, I did some talking to officers and found out different things. And I met up with Mr Haynes over there, the environmental officer, recently, and Mr Maxwell, Stuart Maxwell, he actually produced that document. And it was printed, but it did have Mr Maxwell's name on it, but unfortunately it hasn't come out on the copy, so that's all I can say. But there is. And if I can go over to Mr Haynes now, please, and then you'd like to, if you could tell us about his particular project, please.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, the Council adopted its new Air Quality Action Plan and Low Emission Strategy in December 2017. And following the working groups that 3 members of this committee were active members of, the actions in the strategy were divided into different themes, one of which was transport, and possibly you could say the most important of which was transport. The flagship action within the transport theme was to undertake a feasibility study into either a clean air zone or a low emission zone within Maidstone, which would have the potential to make a real impact upon the air quality within the town. Our original plan was that we would be looking at the High Street, which is only open to buses and taxis, and so it would be sort of simpler to do. But having now got some more monitoring data and the continuous monitor in Upper Stone Street established, it's very clear that the pollution levels in Upper Stone Street are much higher than they are anywhere else in Maidstone, and in fact getting on for as high as anywhere else in Kent apart from the Dartford Tunnel. So, say a low emission zone could have a huge impact aimed at that area. The action plan was very clear in that we would only be able to do this feasibility study if we could get some funding to do it. There isn't the resources or the skills within the Borough Council to do it ourselves. So we did apply to DEFRA for funding. Sorry, Chair. Oh, sorry. So we did apply to DEFRA to fund the initiative. Unfortunately, we were not successful with that DEFRA application. But as part of that funding, we did get a quote from a nationally recognised consultant to undertake the work for us. And the consultant would identify a range of measures with us and engaged with the council and with other stakeholders to reduce pollution in the area, and then put together a qualitative risk assessment so that we could look at the cost-benefit analysis of all of the different measures that could be applied to a low-emission zone or a clean air zone, which would then enable councillors to make an informed decision as to whether or not imposing a low-emission zone within Maidstone is something that they would like to do, with being in full sort of possession of the facts about what the impact would be, what the costs would be, how you would go about doing it, and yeah, how much difference it would make to know whether or not it was something they wanted to progress with. And so the quotation that we got is getting on for a year old now and was for £26,000. So we would propose to ask for £30,000 from the underspend to accommodate any sort of changes in the prices, so that we could go out and procure that piece of work. And that's probably about it, really, unless there's any questions.
Take some questions, thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Ring first, please.
Duncan, you just informed me that Stone Street is the worst in Maidstone. So we're not talking about the wheat sheaf anymore, then?
That's the second worst. Sorry.
You said that without moving your lips, so it was good. And if it is different, how much?
I can't tell you exactly how much off the top of my head now.
But if you could let me know later, that would be very interesting.
But we just had our annual report. So we just had our annual report submitted. Thanks. I'm not moving my lips or my hands now. We've just had our annual report accepted by DEFRA. So we've got all of the figures for 2016, 17, 2017, till December last year, all ready to go. So we can give you those, and I can get those over to you this week.
So I'd like to ask. Sorry, I don't know that. So that's £30,000 just to look into it. Okay.
If I can help at all, there's a website called Kent Air, and if you go on there, you can download all the data of where all the testing's done across the borough. And if Lower Stone Street comes out top, Wheatsheaf comes second, bottom of the High Street is third, and the M20 motorway, which isn't under our control, is about fourth, sort of thing. And the last one I had, the last figures I had, it was Lower Stone Street was 86% above the EU limits, and the Wheatsheaf Junction was 72% above EU limits. So that was the figures I got. So they're pretty high, sort of thing. So, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. At risk of trying to preempt what possible outcome this initial work might have, I just wonder whether we ought to give some consideration to what we would potentially be putting the first steps into here. So a low emission zone, as I understand it, prohibits access to any vehicles that don't meet a certain standard. And I think on a one-way system in a very busy town centre, the possible outcome of that, albeit laudable to try to reduce emissions, will be to penalise the least well-off in our borough who can't afford a Euro 5 or a Euro 4 car by making them drive a longer way around the town centre. And that, as a measure, isn't something that I'm particularly comfortable of. Now, like I say, there's a little bit of me sort of preempting what possible outcome might be from this, and it might not be all that bad, but it's a significant amount of money to find out that it might be right. So I wonder if you could shed some light on the way that that might work.
Yeah, certainly I could. When we initially talked about a low emission zone, the idea was very much that it would be something that would start relatively small and be scalable. So we would initially be focusing on the vehicles which cause the highest level of emissions. The most recent source apportionment, we did identify that as being buses. So we would first start looking at buses. Is the way that we'd initially thought about this is that we'd start on buses, and that that would be a scalable, a graduated approach. So it would start out at a standard that is a standard and a timescale which is achievable by all of the bus companies, and we've done a lot of work with them already. And then you could move that to scale that to the next most polluting sector, or the highest contributing sector of transport, so potentially HGVs, and then sort of move on, say, in that graduated way. There's certainly no thought to be moving straight to a Euro 6 imposition on all vehicles straight away. That wouldn't be feasible.
Yeah. Councillor, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, if I may, and this is a point that I was reluctant to make because it's a little bit kind of quibbling over nothing, but the more that you talk about this and reading this, I know it's a bit of a finer point to make, but it sounds a lot like a suggestion that should be coming from SPS&T and should link into the work, the tri-study work around the bus station and movements around our town centre, rather than something that this committee ought to be putting forward. And I know it's all, we're all one. I'll wait for the sirens. But and I know it's all one council and all one pot of money, and it's a little bit of a sort of finer point to make, like I say. But in that light, I would like to make a counter proposal, if I may, Chairman.
Certainly.
And that would be option 2, and the reason I suggest that is because this committee oversees what I think are frankly the two most important functions of any local authority, and that's to ensure that people have a roof over their heads and that their bins are collected. That's what people care about. But these are things that are not individual one-off spends. They are things where in the future, particularly, albeit the Housing Department is doing incredibly well with achieving its underspend currently, with a great deal of uncertainty in their future, and I hope I speak for some other members in this room, would feel a little bit more comfortable if we were actually tucking these pennies away for the rainy day that may come, to make sure we continue delivering those services to the absolute best of their ability. That's not to say that this idea isn't laudable, but I will be proposing option 2 as a motion, if I may, Chair.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Littlemore wants to come in on this, please.
Yeah, just to clarify for members' benefit, the formulation of policy around air quality management action plans, and that is with the SPST committee. The monitoring and implementation of actions falls on this committee.
Yeah. And if I can possibly let me add on that, when we did the air quality workshop, which we had numerous meetings with various stakeholders, it was a big. I think you came along some of them. There was members from this committee and SPST at the time. So.
If I may, Chairman, I do understand that. The point that I was raising was actually more to do with. I understand the division of labour in that, but The point that I was making was more that when this feasibility study is done, it will undoubtedly have to be tied into things like consideration about what happens with the bus station moving forward, which is outside of our hands. Now, it's a point I don't want to dwell on any further because it's all one council and it's all one pot of underspent money that we're in a fortunate position to be able to allocate. But I just think, you know, we're here to decide on, as I said, like what I think and what I think most people think are the two most important functions this council serves. And that's what we ought to be putting this to, in my opinion.
Well, if I can just chip in a very short bit at the moment, because I've got a few other bits to say later on. But essentially, when I first saw this proposal, exactly, my first thought was health, residents' health, and it wasn't traffic, because that's not our concern, if you know what I mean, on this committee. It is the health of residents. So, sorry, Councillor Ring, you wanted to come back.
Sorry, I thought...
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. I tried, sorry. Right. Right.
Yeah, and I haven't got a lot to add to this other than to say, as far as I was concerned, it was an opportunity. That if we miss this opportunity of doing something, then we've done very little. I know, but it's just how my mind works.
Microphone.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll say it again. I was seeing this as an opportunity that maybe if we don't take the opportunity, it can be lost. Secondly, whether I should say this or not, but I will, my understanding was Heritage and Culture were talking about a much larger sum, wasn't it? 75,000 or something? It was a lot. So all I really wanted to say was, if we're going to do something and the opportunity's there, then I think we shouldn't disregard it. And I know you're not, Matt, or you, Marion, because people's health in Maidstone is as important as having a roof over their head. So all I want to say is let's just see what's on offer for us before we make a decision for it to go into reserves. Because it would worry me that it wasn't used then for our use, if you see what I say, because then it would... But on a second thing, I've got another question. In the papers, it also says that it will be going to policy and resource to make the decision as to how this underspend is either spent or put into reserves, whichever. I do have a bit of a problem with that because we're talking a lot of money here, and I'm one of these people that think all councillors should have that opportunity to say what's happening. I know we can talk to our colleagues, other members, to say what we think, but I do have a little bit of a problem with it not going to council for that decision to be made eventually.
Councillor Burton's got his hand up. Mrs. Ring, did you want to come back first?
Okay. Did DEFRA say why they wasn't willing to contribute?
The DEFRA pot of money is a finite pot, and all of the money in that pot went to the large metropolitan and city councils that have got, I guess, much bigger air quality problems to worry about than us. But the window's open every so often. They're sporadic and unpredictable, and we would obviously bid again whenever we get the opportunity. But the last few bidding rounds have gone to the large boroughs where they've had things like this imposed upon them rather than taking the bold step of trying to do them themselves. And I would just add sort of on the health issue. I mean, we have the reports from Public Health England about how many people die, how many years of life are lost within each town in the UK every year, and I think they put Maidstone somewhere about 70 years worth of people being dead sooner than they would have been if they hadn't had, if the air quality could have been improved to where it should be. You know, it's model data, but it is there, and it is a real health impact, and we are housing people along Upper Stone Street. There are more houses being built up there every day.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, can I come back on the rest of what I was going to say? Sorry.
Yeah, all right. Have you got...
It's all amicable, but you could buy 20 trees and put up there that could help as well. So I'm not going to poo-poo that it's not bad, but my gut reaction is most of them buses that stink go round in my ward, actually past my house. Are you not going to put more traffic on the side roads that are not able to cope with it, where you can actually look in people's windows? And there are 3 areas of deprivation there that won't be able to afford electric cars, can't afford the bus. So all I'm saying is, it's one road. Yes, I know it's bad. And there are going to be more homes up there. But we could plant more trees, because you are never going to cure a little gap like that. Never in a million years with whatever money you've got. So all I'm saying is, I'm trying to see the bigger picture. 26,000. That's for homeless people to be fed, to keep them off the doorways. So all I'm saying is, I don't understand. If it's so important, and also it was taken out of our hands last year by the chairman of this committee and put in transport, blah, blah, blah committee. It was taken out of our hands to make a decision because it was moved by the chairman over to Councillor Burton's committee. So who gave permission for it to come back? So that's why I can't make a decision. It isn't our money, and if they want money, let them ask for it. Thank you.
I'll have to look into that, what you just said. I can't recall it, actually, 100%. I'm going to go to Councillor Rose first, and then perhaps one of the officers would like to come back again. Councillor Rose.
Thank you. Yeah, just to come back on Duncan's last point a little bit, and sorry you're going to be a bit grilling on this one. I know it's I know the wider implications of the study isn't necessarily what you were thinking about, but just first off, all of us in this room obviously have a deep desire to not have 70 years worth of people's lives taken away, just to put that out there. But I think the implication of this study, i.e. a low emission zone, I do a lot of driving in London, so I'm very aware of low emission zones. It can be really, really damaging and impactful on the free movement of vehicles throughout, and I think that our road system, particularly on that one-way system, is so fragile at the moment, and we need to be very careful. And I think it's something that needs to be looked at in a bit more of a wider context, I would say. So I think on the basis of this, that's fine, but I don't think where this study would go, i.e. low emission zones, can really be decided by us in this one context, because it's a Maidstone-wide issue in terms of the roads, which is probably a little bit bigger than us. That's KCC. That's just my view, but I just wanted to put out there that we do very much care about the emissions that lower people's life expectancy, but I don't think this is the way to do that, unfortunately, in my view.
I'll go back to Mr. Haynes.
So just on the issue of whether or not it's an action in the action plan, it is an action in the action plan because it was formally adopted by the council. The council is legally obliged to have this action plan because the air quality, we have declared an air quality management area. And so that action is something that the council has already committed to try to investigate. What we're asking for now at the moment is for the funding to go and do the work to answer all of the questions that you're raising about what would be the impact, how much would it impinge on people, is it something that the council could tolerate in terms of how it would affect businesses and people. That's what we're asking for the funding to find out. We're not sitting before you asking you to adopt a low emission zone. I'm sitting asking you for the money to find out if it's something that you want to actually do, and that's what I say. The action plan commits us to do that already.
Anybody else at the moment? You did, yeah. Okay.
It was a minor point, really, and it was actually in response to something that Councillor Joyce said. I'd echo your sentiments. I think it's a shame in a way that this final decision, it's a quirk of our constitution, falls to P&R, but I take it in a slightly different direction than that. This overspend was largely achieved by this committee. It seems a shame that we can't be pooling these resources and going, tell you what, we'll chuck a little bit more about the housing department, which is the sentiment that I'm trying to express when I say put it into reserves. Hope that P&R stand by that, and we do have some reserves in case we end up in a much worse case scenario in a year or 2 years down the line in our housing department or with our bin collections. I agree with you, but I take that in a slightly different direction. And I don't think that's an opportunity lost by doing that either. You know, that money does have to be spent at some point. We can't sit on it for years and years and years.
Councillor Joy?
Just in response, I mentioned HCL, but there's also strategic planning. And my understanding is they're saying, aren't they? Are they saying it goes into reserves? Yeah. Yes? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to stick by what I said, and I just think it's an opportunity lost.
Okay. Right, if I can give you my thoughts on this, as you probably gathered, I do support this. Essentially, I mean, I think about it from going back to the budget point of view, is that if we needed the money to do this in future, this is a fantastic opportunity, but if we wanted to do it in future, where would the money come from? And I personally wouldn't want to take it out of anything from our budget at the moment regarding homelessness, etc., etc. The action plan gives us the right to take this work forward, and also the government have now said, because of the AQM we have, because of the action plan, we have all the rights in the world to carry this forward as an authority. And we are the only ones that can do it. KCC can't do it. We can do it here. So this is our opportunity. I'm sure I'm right in saying that. It's that the power lays with us as a district authority. This would be a first for Maidstone. As I mentioned before, it's 80% above EU limits, that particular area. And I don't really know, but they're converting the flats there on the corner, and there's people living there at the moment, sitting out the front in wheelchairs and that, breathing in the air on that particular point. It's openly reported now that it's the biggest environmental killer, air pollution, in the country, above many other things. I personally think it's a must-do. We ought to do this, and we owe it to the residents' health. I mean, I did a survey about 2 years ago up the Lewes Road, just of our local transport route, and asked how many people used inhalers. And I tell you what, the return, it was a relatively low return, I admit that. We put out 200 letters, we had probably about 60, 70 back. But the percentage of people that are using inhalers, and when you knock on the front door, you see all the muck and dust and particles that are on there, on the paintwork. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So something has to be done. Whether we go to this tonight, I don't know, but I think it's so important. And even in the full council papers for tomorrow night, what is the biggest amount of pages that are in there? Air quality. And everybody's talking about it, but nobody's doing anything. And we've always said, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that, we haven't got any money, this costs this. We have an opportunity here now, £30,000. In the great scheme of things, I understand if it was piled up here, yes, it was a lot of money. But to be honest, how much is somebody's life worth? How much is somebody's poor health worth? And personally, I think it's worth taking forward. But I think Councillor Ring.
Good electioneering tonight, Chairman. Well done. I hope they got every word. No one is saying anything about not helping people. But when I look at the death rates of the people in this borough, the highest is Shepway North, South and Parkwood. Now, I don't see anybody asking for a couple of £1,000 there to say, let's give them something nice for the day. So let's just put it in perspectives. Bus companies should be supplying buses with low emissions. I have been told by officers in this council, apparently you have good talk, so that all happens. So why would I be worrying about a bus going up Stone Street? Then what are you going to do about all the lorries that have to go up to the businesses at Parkwood? There's no other road. There's Willington Street, there's West Park Road, there's South Park Road, all them roads. So, by all means, cure the people that hardly walk up Stone Street, and if you live there, they know what it's all about. They've been there for years. Nothing's never been no different. So if you're going to cure one street, you've got to cure it all. You've got to go all the way up the Lewes Road. You've got to go up Sutton Road. Will you come back and ask for another 30,000 for that? And another 30,000 for the next road? Because if that's the case, put in 90,000, because there's a couple of areas I'd like you to look at for me. The wheat sheaf that comes in my ward on Sutton Road. And I don't think I'm asking anything wrong, Chairman, because one shopping list is as good as another.
Thank you. Because you brought that up, I mean, it's my fault, but basically I should have asked if anybody else has any projects that they could suggest that you think that it's a great opportunity. I know HCL are probably going to still progress theirs, so we all have to. Yeah. Councillor Burton.
Chairman, if I may just put a reminder out to other members in this room. I proposed option 2 earlier. I wonder whether I might have a second somewhere.
Okay, do we... all right, we'll go to that then. So, Councillor Burton proposed option 2. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ring was first, I think. Okay. We'll do that... No, hang on a minute. I've got to do this right. I'll do that first. Yeah, okay. We'll take a vote on option 2 then, please. Those for? Those against? Nobody abstaining, so we've got a stalemate. So I have a casting vote, and I will vote against the proposal. Thank you for that. From the Chair, I'd like to propose that we go for option 1, and that we actually...
Before you do, can I please just say something?
Certainly.
In view of what Councillor Ring has just said, and I think your words were lost opportunity, that can I I do understand what you've just said, and all I'm saying is the proposal for this air quality to be done in stone, that it is that area, or is it something that we could discuss? Just a question before I vote.
That's good. Thank you for that. Mr. Haynes, please.
Yeah, sorry. Just to try and clarify, I guess, we're looking at Stone Street as being the worst bit of air quality in Maidstone, and because of the way that the Maidstone one-way system works, if you declared a low emission zone in Stone Street, you would effectively capture the whole of the road system, the one-way system in Maidstone. So you would help everybody in the air quality management area. And we would then, and as I said before, this is a feasibility study to see what the impact would be. It's not to actually impose it. It is to give you, the councillors, the information that you need to decide, having seen what the benefits and the risks would be, whether it's something that you want to do. It's not to actually do it, and yeah, so it would benefit more than just the people who live on Stone Street, and it isn't aimed at people in cars. It isn't initially aimed, and it's something that we would start off with in a small way and gradually extend to produce an incremental benefit. Well, no. If you decide, having had been in full sort of possession of all of the information, that it's worth something, that is something that you want to do. And if you don't, then we've done what we said we would do in the action plan. We've investigated whether it's something that we want to do, and then we've decided not to. And if we do, then we'll go ahead and do it, or try and work out how to do it.
If I just come back on that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's really helped me. So it would be helping everyone, and I think the reason I'm being swayed even more, I need to make that clear to everybody, it's because the opportunity is here that the money is from an underspend. Now, it could be, I could be sitting here, who knows, if I'm re-elected, where we're talking about it again. And that money, I might have to make that awful decision that it's coming out of a pot that we haven't allocated. So I think the decision has helped me. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to come in? Okay, I would like to propose from the chair that we, I'd propose option 1 as per the papers, with the proviso that we go ahead with a project on a feasibility study for the Lower Stone Street area as a low emission zone study. You want to second it? Thank you very much. Those for, please. Those against? And so there's no abstentions. So that's carried. Thank you very much.
I mean, I'm coming back again. We've agreed. Okay. I know you haven't. But it's still got to go through P&R.
Yes.
Or council or whoever.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Denise just come in. Mine's the same. I think we should be doing the top 3 for the Maidstone Borough, because you said a one-way system. Lewes Road is not the one-way system, nor is the Wheatsheaf a one-way system. So all I'm saying is it's a shame that the poor people up there are being left out. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you, members. Thank you very much, Mr. Haynes, for all your time and coming along this evening. Right, we're going on to the next item now, which is agenda item 13, which made me laugh when I first read it, pets in temporary accommodation, but I think that will come a bit... but that will come out in the light, as it's quite a serious subject, actually. And Mr. Littlemore is going to present this for us.
Members, I'm not going to dwell on this. It's an issue that's been raised from time to time. Previously, it's not really been within our gift to dictate whether our applicants can retain their pets or not, but as we've built up our own portfolio, that's changed. So basically, we are saying that we want to try and demonstrate that it is possible to accommodate people with their animals. Just on one correction that I need to draw to your attention on page 14, under crime and disorder, that should read, the recommendation will have a nil impact on crime and disorder, not a negative impact. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Pearl, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is wonderful, actually, because it's obviously going to be one less stress for people having to go into emergency accommodation, and it's possibly one less hurdle, I guess, to helping to sort entrenched rough sleeping. What I'd say, just sort of in some of the detail, the terms in the sort of contract on page 20 don't seem to quite tally with the provisions in the policy in pages 16 to 19. And I would have thought it would be better if there was sort of one set of terms and conditions annexed to the policy and annexed to the contract, as opposed to sort of 2 different lists with a little bit of overlap. And my second point, it's an ancillary point, is the reference to complaints in pages 18 to 19. It may just be the way I'm reading it, but it doesn't sort of, it's sort of like, there seems to be a presumption that if a complaint is made, then the person with the dog or some other animal is sort of at fault. And it'd be nice if there was some sort of reference to having a sort of a bit of an investigation or something like that, or looking into a complaint, as opposed to that sort of presumption.
I was going to say, I don't know whether you had your microphone on then or off. I don't know. We had a little bit. Is it working? We couldn't hear you. Your voice was quite low, and I just made sure it was working. That's all. Okay.
Do you need me to repeat it, or?
Yeah, yes, please. If you could, just for the record. Thank you.
Right. Okay. It's wonderful, etc. My issues were technical, and was that the terms in the contract on page 20 didn't appear to tally with the particular terms in the policy itself on pages 16 to 19. And secondly, that the provisions for complaints on pages 18 going on to 19 appear to have a presumption that the person with the animal, with the pet, was, was automatically found at fault without any sort of form of looking into the complaint.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Littlemore, could you possibly come back on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. The Appendix A would be attached to the Appendix B when it's given to the tenant, so they would have both copies. So I take your point, and I'm happy to amend the part about if someone complains to make it clear that we would investigate the veracity of that first.
Councillor Ring.
Just wanted to ask very quickly, this declaration here that you're going to be asking people to sign, is this council kept? Or if you put them in a social housing, does this document go over with them to social housing? I just want to come back after you've answered, John. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Just to clarify, this document is for persons who are placed into our temporary accommodation. We don't have the ability to insist that the housing association landlords or the private landlords that they might then move on to as permanent accommodation adopt it. What we're hoping is to be able to demonstrate, as I said earlier, that it can work and persuade our housing providers to adopt something similar.
Well, I think it's a very amicable thing, because I get lots of people that crying over the phone because they can't take a place because they can't take their dogs. And I know we've spoken about lots of times over the years, John. But I do worry about keeping the cat in. I'm a cat owner, and she does like laying over next doors in the sunshine, and when the sun moves, it comes around. And really, that would stop smelly houses because of not having a litter tray inside the house. So don't you think we ought to be a little bit more lenient about a cat? It just seems so hard.
I think we'll take a pragmatic view on each occasion, yes.
Anyone else? Councillor Burton.
I have a few points and questions to clarify things, but firstly I'd like to echo the sentiments of Councillor Ring. I fairly recently had to temporarily keep my cat when my mum was moving house in a third floor flat, and he absolutely hated it, and he got an awful lot fatter not being able to go outside for a little while. So I think actually we ought to perhaps go as far as taking that out of here. I'm not sure why it's in here that a cat has to be kept inside, but I actually think, to be honest, if you're talking about a month of keeping a cat that's used to roaming around indoors, it's borderline cruel. So I think I personally would like to see that out of here. My other points were you've got two lists in here. One about the species of pets that are allowed, and the other about numbers. My first thought when I read this through the first time was, it seems a little bit dogmatic. You know, what if I've got a snake? You know, not a venomous snake, totally different kettle of fish, sort of thing. But, you know, seemed a little bit dogmatic. And then I read through it a second time and I thought, actually, it's not that it's dogmatic, it's that it seems like an unnecessary list on second reading, because you've actually got further down the appendix a series of terms and conditions that outline in a negative qualification way by saying what you're not allowed in terms of farm animals. And I just think that's a much better way to put it. Because, all right, so you might apply a little bit of leniency in certain circumstances. We've got to also be careful about what we're putting down on paper, so I'd quite like to see those lists gotten rid of as well. My third is a question, which is there is a reference to a service charge for making sure that the accommodation is kept in a certain manner if you've got a dog in there. I'd like to ask how much that additional service charge might be and how regularly it's charged. My fourth is also a question. You talk about pet rehousing advice in a scenario where an offer of temporary accommodation is made that doesn't include the dog, cat, whatever. What kind of advice will be given? Because the scenario I wouldn't want us to be in is where we're advising that actually they give up their dog for adoption, but they're only going to be staying there for 30 days. Are we going to be putting advice on the table that says, well, actually, there's a fairly reasonably priced kennel service that allow you to pay on 30-day terms or whatever here? Your dog could lodge there for 30 days. You know, I'd hate to think that we're going to be turning around and putting people in the position of, well, you can either say no to this or we're going to give you advice that says there's a lovely family down the road that wants your dog. Bear with me, there's only, I think, 2 more points here. There's a point somewhere in here as well about not leaving dogs for long periods of time. Now, again, I'm sure a sort of modicum of discretion will be applied to this, but that reads to me, I'm in temporary accommodation, I'm trying to get a job, it's 12-hour shifts, but if I take the job, I lose my dog under this, because I'm going to be out of the house for 12, 14 hours at a time. I just think, whilst I understand that some discretion can be applied because it's our own accommodation as a council, I think we've got to be a little bit careful about how strongly we word things on paper. Because if I'm looking at temporary accommodation, I've got this in front of me, and all I care about that I've got left in the world is my dog, and I really want my dog to move in with me, I'm actually going to think twice about going for that job interview for the 12-hour shift cleaning or whatever. And last point, and it's similar to a point that Councillor Pearl raised, the section on keeping pets without permission, in the same way that Councillor Pearl says if you get a complaint, is there going to be a presumption of guilt? Now, this is controversial, but I'd like to throw it out there as a suggestion. Would we be allowing retrospective applications? So I get caught, my dog's in my flat, are we going to immediately go in there and go, well, look, you can't put an application in now, or are we going to say, well, look, actually, this flat is suitable. If you read through this and sign here, look, you shouldn't have done it, but we'll let you keep your dog. So I just worry about the way some of these bits read, because some of them are particularly strong. So I just wonder if you could come back on a couple of questions that were in there, if that wasn't so convoluted.
Right, over to Mr Littlemore with those points. Okay, and I do know the answer to the last one, if that's any help, because I asked it myself.
In all of these matters, if we were to end anybody's occupation, we would have to do a test that is reasonable and proportionate. So that applies always. So, yeah, if we find out someone's got their dog and the dog's been fine and there's no problems, then clearly we wouldn't take action. It wouldn't be proportionate. If we find out that somebody's breeding pit bull terriers and all the rest of it, then, you know, that might be a different scenario. To pick up all the points that are being made by members around that word, and perhaps if we have a recommendation that says that you give me delegation to amend those, I've got a flavour of what you've said and I can craft some words around it to reflect that. I'm happy to do so.
Thank you for that. Councillor Joy.
Yeah, I think Matt's covered most of what I was thinking about, but I think the response from the officer is one way forward, because I think monitoring, and if you don't get on with whoever's near you and they're complaining about your cat or dog being in, out or whatever, it could get very messy. So I think you've got to use a little bit of, have a bit of discretion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burton.
Sorry, there was one question that I really did need an answer on in there, actually, which was what would the additional service charge be for keeping a pet?
the reason we didn't put a figure was because we wanted to be able to reflect what would be a reasonable cost. So it might be just something simple, like clean a bit of carpet in the hallway, or it might be something more where there's damage that's happened. That's why we didn't. But I can amend that to say a reasonable charge that reflects the cost of to the council of putting the property back in.
Okay. Anybody else like to have any comment?
Rather than, do we need to change the recommendation
Yes.
to reflect what Mr Littlemore's just said?
Okay. Well, I'll read the recommendation as it is on the papers at the moment, and that's that the Communities Housing Environment Committee approve the PET Policy 2018, an agreement and agreement attached as Appendix A and B of this report, and I was going to say delegate to officers the power to amend appendices as required in the future.
Give delegated authority.
Delegated authority.
To amend the policy.
I mean, it's going to say, yeah, okay.
As discussed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we go. You've started off, Councillor Joy. Councillor Burton, Councillor Joy proposed, Councillor Burton seconds. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Lovely, okay. Over to, item 14 now. Waste and Recycling Strategy 2018-23 from Jen Shepherd. She'll be give us the presentation on the screen. Oh, it's the next one. Sorry, she won't be giving us a presentation on the screen. That's the next item. But over to Mrs Shepherd, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as the committee will hopefully remember, last year we brought the Waste and Recycling Strategy 2014-2019 to the committee as a review, and identified that actually the targets set within it were extremely ambitious, and actually the without any significant service changes were actually undeliverable. So following that, we held a workshop with open to all members and discussed a number of options that we could consider for the services going forward. Some of those were fairly challenging, such as alternative frequencies of collection, but equally looked at what was happening nationally, and we had representatives from LARAC, which is the Local Authority Recycling Advisory Committee, and from the Kent Resource Partnership to give the sort of Kent context. Following that, we've been away and prepared a revised new waste strategy. So this new waste strategy for 2018 to 2023 to take into account the views of members through that workshop, the national context, the actual position that Maidstone was in at the time. So I'll just give a run through of exactly what sort of has been picked up. Firstly, we wanted to make sure that actually there's a lot happening nationally and internationally regarding waste and recycling at the moment, and has happened over the sort of last probably 12 months, which has really changed that picture that the world we're operating in. Firstly, actually, the recycling industry has been very unstable over the past sort of 12 months, particularly some changes with China and the Asian markets on recycling of paper and of plastics. Also, a series on the television actually drove up some interest with the public, particularly on single-use plastics, and has really driven this sort of shift towards a lot more interest in that area. And as a result, the government have sort of picked up on this, and they're proposing a number of significant changes going forward with policies and legislation, including potentially looking at a deposit return scheme later in the year, as well as taxes on disposable coffee cups. And it's also mooted that where we've had the tax on landfill in the past, there might actually be a tax on incineration or energy from waste. So this really changes sort of the context in which we're operating in. In addition to that, we have much more stringent sort of requirements for the recycling we collect and we take into the material recycling facility. So we have to be really careful about the quality of recycling we're collecting and presenting going forward. We're also aware of potentially future targets coming out of firstly of the EU, and the government have already indicated that following our departure from the EU, that legislation is likely to come into UK law. So again, we need to look at the materials we're collecting and potentially specific targets set out. Maidstone specifically has been at the forefront of waste and recycling in Kent over the past sort of 5+ years. We went in 2010, we were at 30%, and we're now over at 50% recycling, which leads us as second place in Kent, which I think is really positive achievement. Also, a number of authorities have seen declining recycling levels and recycling rates. At Maidstone, we've held our own. We've actually maintained that through that behaviour change, that education, as well as obviously a touch of enforcement in there, because it's noted that 10% of our properties are communal collections, which obviously are a lot harder to deal with, and we have taken a fairly tough line with member support on the housing trusts, on managing agents, to ensure that work is pushed forward. So the strategy sticks with the principles of the waste hierarchy that we've stuck with since 2010, but it really focuses on reducing waste and reducing cost. This strategy is in line with the final 5 years of our waste contract, the Mid-Waste Kent Partnership, and it's important to say that we did have significant savings as part of this contract. So that was £1 million a year for Maidstone alone. Times will be tough as of 2023. It will be a challenge to keep those costs down. So over the next 5 years, we do need to do a lot of work at looking at how we can minimise those costs. East Kent are already doing a piece of work because they're going out a couple of years before us, and we're watching, obviously, with interest at the South West Kent model of Tunbridge Wells and Tunbridge and Morling to see sort of the indicative prices for the services there. So a part of this is obviously looking at what we can do over the next 5 years to put us in the best possible position, as we did with the last contract. So if you remember, back in 2011, we introduced the food waste collections, we introduced the fortnightly refuse collections ahead of the 2013 new contract. If we can be just ahead of the game, it always puts us in that best possible situation. High quality recycling equally is really important going forward to ensure that our recycling is accepted. We have a place to sell it. Obviously that is Kent County Council's responsibility, but equally we have to provide it to them in a decent quality so they can actually sell it on the open market and they can get good prices for it, keeping that cost down to the Kent taxpayer. Aside from this, although this is our strategy, it fits in line with the emerging revised Kent Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy that will be brought back to this committee separately, but it's the same themes you'll see throughout. And finally, it's important that in the past we haven't really touched on the fact that the objective for the council is clean, green and safe environment, and actually enforcement on that side needs to play a role within our waste strategy. So there is a whole section on there about a borough we're proud of and looking at that continuing zero approach to littering and fly tipping. So overall, the objectives that we have in here, it is to set a sort of a objective of 50% recycling on household waste. You could say, well, we're already there, but again, without making significant changes to service, it's unlikely we will get much beyond that. And I think we should be realistic in saying, actually, we're happy with 50%. We're second in Kent. That's, it delivers what we need to for the next 5 years. But alongside that, some really key ones on, making sure we are reducing contamination. We do look at that zero waste to landfill. Some may say that's extremely ambitious because you might never get zero waste, but I think it's still that objective we should strive for. Again, and then capture rates on recycling, quality rates on recycling. And there is a very clear vision in there, which I will very, very, very quickly read, because I think hopefully it sums up everything that's within the strategy, which is for Maidstone Borough to be at the forefront of the national drive towards eliminating unnecessary waste, particularly single-use plastics, and empowering our residents to live more sustainably and actively engage in the delivery of innovative waste reduction, recycling and collection services. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a concise and on such a very large subject, if I could put it like that. So thank you very much. Right, questions, members. I did have Councillor Pearl first, and then Councillor Joy next.
Right, hopefully this will work this time. I've got three sort of points or issues with this, if I may. The first is if I compare the current draft to the 2014-2019 strategy, and it's in terms of objectives that we've taken out improving resident satisfaction with MBC's waste and recycling services. And I've obviously got something of a concern about that, given that, as was covered earlier, emptying the bins is, frankly, that piece of value that most people actually see from the council. And on the doorsteps, when people were saying to me, well, £2,000 for a council tax, well, it's an expensive bin collection service. So the second point touches on the issues relating to enforcement. And whilst, obviously, where we're enforcing against landlords and managing agents, I think I can see the role for that. My concern is we get into this thing that some local authorities do of bin police and, going through and harassing householders who get their bins in a mix, which does rather concern me. I couldn't really see any sort of detail on that in terms of powers process and frankly also whether that's a great use of resource given that we seem to struggle to enforce our own public spaces protection order in this borough. My third point was really just it would help to have some sort of gap analysis in terms of understanding where we're short on recycling facilities, how many properties are impacted where we don't currently have decent recycling facilities and so forth. If I can give you an example, take a Waterside Gate in Maidstone. It's a place I know well because I live there. We've got 13 properties. We've not had recycling since the contractors changed because the contractors were unable to secure agreement from Network Rail that to get a decent unit under the bridge that the previous contractors used, and therefore we now just have a man on a van come down through the small tunnel, and therefore we don't have any recycling facilities. And I would have thought that trying to sort of close the gap and improve the sort of recycling facilities for those of us who don't have them is possibly more important than rifling through people's bins and finding them if they don't put them in the right boxes and stuff.
Okay, over to Jen.
I'll try and take them in order. I've hopefully written them down right. So regarding, obviously, customer satisfaction, we can certainly look at maintaining the very high satisfaction we've already got, but I think that was the point, is we're already sort of upper 90% satisfaction in many, particularly waste collection, more than recycling, because I think there's always that ambition to do more and be able to recycle more. It is exceptionally high, and so I think it was one of those that probably on my part it's almost a given that we know that the service is good, but I take your points that we need to write that in there, that actually we're maintaining the levels. I think increasing it we're going to struggle, so I take that one. With regard to enforcement, there is actually another policy that sits beside the waste strategy that I haven't brought back because we weren't looking at revising it, but it regards it's just generally our household and waste and recycling policy which dictates when we would do enforcement action. Within that, we certainly don't want to be the bin police, and we don't look at taking enforcement action against individuals, particularly don't look at any sort of compulsive recycling or where people have put the wrong items in the bin. We try and work with them, and then if necessary look at, okay, take, if it just doesn't work, we look at taking the bin away rather than any sort of enforcement or financial penalty. And then the final one about recycling facilities, yes, I know Waterside Gate well. I don't think it actually had anything to do with the change in contractor. I know that it may have been at the same time, because the staff were exactly the same. Everyone two-piece over, other than branded vehicles, everything was pretty much the same. And I understand that one, unfortunately, we tried recycling and there were issues with ongoing contamination. But again, we can always look at it again. We have, an education officer who's more than happy to go and do a bit of door knocking and try and engage with the residents. And again, we can try the whole Network Rail thing. I think it was because of redevelopment of the site is what they were looking at, and they just didn't want to give us permission to keep going around there because they had other plans for the site.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Joy next.
Thank you. Very concise report. I like the way it was laid out, which was telling me the national, what's happening in Maidstone. So thank you very much. I'm always pleased when we talk about this because it is one of the things that my ward work has gone down considerably when it comes to waste and collections. And if I do get a call from a resident, it's generally put right very quickly. So I thank the team for that because it's working well. The other thing which pleased me in the Maidstone story was your last paragraph where you were talking about communal bins, because in High Street, and I'm not talking town centre, I'm talking my residential area, I'm having lots of communal bins put in. So I'm glad that's on your radar. Not really a question, but just to say I know it's been a problem, especially with new flats and that's being built. So it's good to see that's on your radar. And I do have a question, though, on page 32. It says, second to last paragraph, we will start discussions with KCC, Ashford and Swell to agree beneficial partnership arrangements post-2023. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit for me, please?
Yeah. That's because that is Mid-Kent Joint Waste Partnership, so that's who we are at the moment. So it's the collective contract. So it's looking at hopefully continuing that because I think it works very well.
Right, lovely. Okay, I've got Councillor Ring next, please.
Well, as Denise has said, no. Again, a good report. We could pick it apart as much as we want. And I'd like to say we do 100%, but we're dealing with human nature. And I get a few calls on bins, etc., etc. And like myself, I report it, and I must say your staff are very amicable, and within a day it's all sorted. And I thank you for that, because it is the most thing that people pay for. I wish you was getting more out of the budget, because I think you deserve it, especially when it comes to the fly tipping, because I've got a few areas in my ward that ain't being sorted, but I'm sure they'll do that now. But on all, I think we're doing okay. And I just think we've got to make social landlords, etc., responsible for their properties, for their land, because if I was an individual and I wasn't playing by the rules, you would soon prosecute. So I think that's one thing we've got to our senior officers to be looking at, because it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Burton.
Councillor Ring's actually more or less just said what I was going to say. I was really pleased to see enforcement, particularly against landlords, management companies, etc., being brought into this, because I do know of a number of particularly larger landlords in our borough that don't always have the greatest of respect for proper waste management, I think, is the democratic way to, the diplomatic way to put it. And the second thing that I'd like to, which I wasn't going to bring up, but you specifically referenced it in something you said earlier, there's a few mentions in this report about things like road shows and face-to-face engagement. Now, I love doing that sort of thing, and it's the reason I got into politics, was because I'm a gobby sound, and I like going out talking to people. I think it's fantastic that we do that. I'd just like to get your opinion, though, on whether you think actually that's the most efficient way of engaging when you're talking about employing the resources of the educational officer that you've talked about.
I think this year we've been particularly more focused on it. So I think in the past, possibly not, where it's that mass, you go out to your major shopping centres and hope you get the people. This year we've actually linked it in with where we know there's low performance. So we've done more road shows, we've engaged with, parish councils with fetes and things like, with schools to go into smaller sort of areas where we can actually hopefully target specific people. And going forward, we're looking at linking with existing groups that already happen, so residents groups, that type of, community group where we can really target specific areas, because I think, if you do that broad brush, it's very difficult. Again, with the sort of being able to actually door knock, if you get a few roads where we know we're getting the information back from our contractor that, recycling performance is low, contamination is high, actually going to have that face-to-face really does work, but it's got to be targeted, and that's what this is all about.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any questions at all? No, I fully support this. I think they do an excellent, or you and your team do an excellent job, if I can do that. I do pick up on this landfill number, because I've spoken to you about it before, but the Kent Resource Partnership have a figure of 2% landfill, and the Borough Council have 0% landfill. So, and if you've got a target there, basically, I think it ought to be 0 for landfill, if you're going to have a target. But essentially, as we've said, the resident survey comes out very well, bin collections, etc., etc., and thank everybody, the whole team, for doing such a fantastic job over the years, not just this year, but also when Councillor Ring was sitting here, there was we had good. Right, very good. Okay, thank you. So I move from the Chair the recommendation on the papers that the draft waste and recycling strategy 2018-23 as set out in Appendix 1 is adopted and the actions contained within it are implemented. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Burton, thank you. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, it's 10 to 8. I was going to ask if does anybody like to have a break at all for 5 minutes? Is it okay? 2 minutes? Right, well, we'll stop there for a moment and we'll have a 2-minute comfort break. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you very much. We're now going to go on item 15 on page 34, Town Centre Public Convenience Provision. Mr Edwards will be presenting. Sorry, Jen Shepherd will be presenting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, John will be presenting some of the slides in a short moment. So, as the committee is aware, we presented an update report last year, I believe it was, or earlier this year, sorry, for the community toilet scheme. And as a result of that, the committee requested that options for a town centre public convenience, fully costed options, were brought back to the committee for discussion. So what you have in front of you are, within the report, are 5 delivery models for how we could provide a public toilet within the town centre. These are basically a purpose-built prefabricated unit, an in-build facility within an existing unit, a temporary rental unit, reopening an existing facility, or inclusion of a facility within a new development. So just to give you a brief sort of summary of those, and firstly, I think highlighted in the report, there are three key areas that need to be considered when thinking about these delivery models. Firstly, location of where any of these could actually be located. The report does touch on some options, however, appreciate, we're open to other ideas. I mean, we've explored everything we can think of, but more than welcome to put that out. Usage, wherever this is located, it really would need to be in an area of fairly high footfall, but people can easily access it. And because the options we've looked at and the costings we've included in the report actually are it's a chargeable model, it would need that footfall in order to generate the income contained within the report. And then lastly, cost. Obviously, there's some significant capital and revenue costs associated with the delivery of this. So, touching on the first one, a standalone facility, there are a couple of black and white pictures within this, but we thought it would be better to actually provide you some colour pictures. So this is obviously from one particular manufacturer. There are other manufacturers available, but this is the one we've looked at because they've been particularly helpful. So you can see there are 4 of these facilities. They look like, purpose-built toilet facilities. But if you go on to the next slide. Okay, yep, so inside they're literally units that are designed to be easy to clean. They can be jet washed out. There's not too many places where, obviously, paraphernalia or other things could be left, so it makes it safer. What's the next one? They do units that is for changing places, so they do a facility that would enable a hoist facility within it. This is what it actually is. It literally is a prefab unit. So there you see it at the factory. So although it looks like a brick built, being built from the ground up, it literally is, and if you take the next slide, craned in. So it literally does get put into place, plumbed in, obviously, but it is, you can have any outward look you like. I think that first slide showed different sort of, there's brick, there's sort of metal exteriors, there's wood exteriors, all sorts. So that one includes the changing places. So you see it's quite a large unit to include changing places. That also contains, this one in particular, had an area for an attendant, and it also has a small shop on the other end. So they literally can be built to any specification you like. That's it. Okay, so they're the pictures. So just so you get a flavour of exactly what a standalone facility looks like. So for one of these, as contained within the report, you would be looking for a town centre our size. You would be looking to have basically a DDA compliant unit plus 3 unisex toilets. Now that would be those doors immediately onto the outside, so it's not going in different cubicles, and that would be then a chargeable coin pay at the entrance. That type of facility, you are looking at nearly 6.5 metres long by nearly 3 metres wide. It is not a small unit for that. If you then add a changing places unit, you need to add for that alone 3 metres by 4 metres. So that in itself is a large sort of unit that would be bolting onto that. So within that report, you can see for standalone, we've looked at the cost of, without the changing places, about 134,000. If you added the changing places, potentially also an attendance office, it ranges from either an additional 20,000 all the way up to additional 65,000 if you had full changing places plus attendance office. Now, I've come up with 6 potential locations for this. None of them particularly, perfect. So obviously, firstly, Medway Street, there's a redundant motorcycle parking area outside the car park down the side. Jubilee Square, I'll throw that out there. It's a large space. It certainly could take the size of it, not necessarily where you'd want the toilet. Bottom of Gabriel's Hill, again, it is an area for potential redevelopment, so it's a bit of an issue, but there is a space down towards the bottom of Gabriel's Hill. Lower High Street, so bottom of Remembrance Square, down towards that way. Particularly, I'm sure, would be of interest to our county neighbours at Sessions, side of Sessions Square. And then finally, Brenchley Gardens. Actually, we have a toilet in there, but there is the space in Brenchley Gardens to put one of these units, so you could do it that way. So what we've also then included in that is the revenue cost, which you would be looking at, assuming there was an attendant, because all I would say is, without an attendant, there is a significant risk of antisocial behaviour, vandalism. We've had 2 toilets within the town previously that have been sort of, attracted a lot of issues, let's put it like that. So to have an attendant and all of that, you're looking at, and then deducting the income from that pay to use, sort of £67,000 per annum to operate. The next option was an in-build existing premises. So again, you can have all those prefab units without the exterior cladding, you can have put into a unit of some description. So that could be, it could be a retail unit. I doubt anyone would want them as their neighbours, but it could be, a unit you have. It has been mentioned previously that there is another toilet within Market Buildings. You could look at doing something in there, putting the in-build into that. But again, you're looking at, although the capital investment is lower at 102,000, the actual revenue costs you're looking near 91,000 because you'd have to pay rent on something because there's not anywhere we own that we could put it into without that market rent. If you didn't use the prefab units going in and just built it up, we've done something very similar at Vinters Park Crematorium, and you're looking at a cost of about £90,000 anyway to do the, literally getting a builder in and building it. So it's comparable. Next option is reopen an existing facility. I've tried to present this report in a very fairly, these are the options and not with any recommendations. However, reopening an existing facility is not an ideal option, and I would there is a suggestion I would recommend we don't look at that, purely because Fairmeadow, we have actually now put a lease on that. So there's a cafe barge down on the river. There's actually leasing part of that. The rest of it is in really bad disrepair. The roof's caved in and there's all sorts of damage down there. The other one is obviously Brenchley Gardens, which we touched on. Every time that's opened, it is vandalised, and it is not an ideal facility in its current state. So, again, I wouldn't recommend we reopen that because we've been there and done it before. Another option is a rental unit. So the fancy ones you've seen on the screen, you can actually rent that. In the report are the those premium costs for the rental. So you'd be looking at £104,000 a year to full in, that's, renting it, and actually all the charges associated with cleaning, maintaining, etc. You could do, and there's a picture that wasn't in the slides but it's in the report, there are local companies that provide units that often use events, so they're sort of your more premium portable units. But again, the cost is still £22,000 a year to hire one of those, so you're still looking at near on 90. That was for the 2, in fairness, because they're not that big, you'd have to have 2. Again, so, and the locations equally are, it would have to be one of the locations we discussed previously, or somewhere someone else can suggest. There's not many places that could accommodate that. And then the final option is alternative delivery models. So we are aware that there are a number of facilities within the town centre, or potential developments within the town centre. So I've touched on there's Maidstone East. There's a further development at the mall, and then there's potentially the bus station. So there's a number of places where in the future it may come up, but at the moment it's not a viable option. So that is the full costings of what we looked at. The actual report sets out 4 options for the committee to look at. One is to actually say, yes, there is a need, there is an aspiration for us to have this, and we want to put in a request to Policy and Resources for funding for one of those options, ideally with a location agreed. Option 2 is same as option 1, but ultimately there may be a location I haven't included within this report that we haven't thought of, that you're aware of, and that could be considered. Option 3, it's a nice to have, but it's something we actually just, the cost is prohibitive because it is a lot of money. Even the cheapest option, you're talking nearly £70,000 a year. Or option 4, actually, it isn't a statutory requirement for us to have this, and therefore we shouldn't consider it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, for another concise, on quite a large subject. I have Councillor Ring first, please.
A very good report, but I think any one of us has read this can see it for what it actually is. We haven't got the sort of money for here. And I think in the future, when they do the station or they do the mole down in the Gables Hill, I think that would be the ideal time to go in. Because what we haven't got in here that's been solely missed is, when this all happened years ago, it got, well, we'll go in there at 10 o'clock at night. You've obviously just given me daytime hours. You haven't given me 24/7. So don't worry about doing that, because it makes sense to educate your people that that would be double the cost. And Saturdays and Sundays. So I'm quite happy with the toilet scheme that we got. I think we should keep our ears open for other places that want to take part until new places are built. Because not on top of that, we would need cameras in the area. Because I've said it before and I've said it again, you've got anywhere where there's going to be money, there's going to be crime. And it's just not helpful. Nobody sitting round here, surely, could give that sort of money and look the people, the taxpayer, in Maidstone in the eye and say, well, that's what we're going to do, waste that money. We've got to wait our turn, and we've got opportunities coming up with the station, with Gables Hill, with the mole. We are in partnership with them, so I'm sure if there was good negotiations, something could be sorted. But I just can't see how anybody could sit here and waste this money. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Boat.
Thank you, Chairman. Even in the sort of 2 and a bit short years that I've been here, we've had bits of this debate on a number of occasions. And I know that before my time it's come up a number of times as well before us. So, but actually, the last time this came up, maybe 2 or 3 committee cycles back, I supported the idea of bringing this report here in the hope that we might look at all the options, air the debate, and put it to bed one way or another. I have to say that seeing all the options laid out and all of the different considerations that have to be given, location, attendant, no attendant, charge, don't charge, where's the money going to come from? At every single turn, this report comes out quite heavily on this perhaps isn't the best use of our money, I think, of public money that we're charged with the duty of care over as a council. And I think the most damning, if I can say it as strongly as that part of this report, is the end of para 2.1. There is no funding available to provide this new facility. Quite plain, quite simple. Aside from all of the other considerations about location and so on that don't make it a particularly grand, appealing idea, even if a money tree did appear. So I would be happy to move, and by all means the debate will continue, I'm sure, but I will move. I would be happy to move, in honesty, either option 3 or option 4, but I think option 3 perhaps reads a little bit better in terms of the reasoning. And the reason I say I'd be happy with option 4 as well is because of the same point that I was trying to make when we were discussing the possible things that the underspend might be used for. This isn't something that we have to do. This isn't one of the cornerstones that this council is judged by, and actually I would hate to be sat in a position in a year's time where we're looking at whether we take some money out of housing or some money out of waste disposal to try and fund this. So I will move as per the papers up for option 3, Chair.
Okay. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Ring. Okay. So I beg your pardon, did you say option 3?
Yeah, option 3, so as per the papers,
as per the
papers.
papers.
Is the recommended
Okay.
option 3.
Right, okay. Councillor Joy. No.
Oh, sorry.
Off. That's it.
It's better? Yep, thank you. I think what I've just got to say is we've all got our own views, and I sit here not as Denise that's sitting here, it's residents that's saying what they want. Is Denise satisfied with the community toilet scheme? No, and I haven't been for a long time, and everyone knows that, so I don't want to go back with it. But all I know is every year we look at it, whether it's 2 years, 3 years or whatever, the number diminishes of who's taking part in our scheme. Started off with 15, I think we're now down to 9, 8, whatever. And I think the biggest thing for me was when the gateway stopped being used, because that is a Maidstone Borough Council as well facility. I know it's KCC and all the rest of it, but that really did gripe at me when we stopped the members of the public going in and using the gateway. Anyway, going back to the toilets, I must admit, when I looked at them, they reminded me of the toilets in the park when I was sort of 15. Not that I'm saying I hung around toilets in the park, but that's what they remind me of. And I was a little bit disappointed on the look. So, and I understand what's been said. The timing could be right when something happens at the station or the mall. Understand all that. But I think as far as I'm concerned, we are the county town of Kent. Other places have public conveniences. Yes, they have to be paid for and have to be manned because there's people there that are not good at looking after things. I understand all that. But if it's taken completely away from us, and if I put my hand up to the option, I forget which one it was Councillor Burton suggested,
3.
I think it's got to be said that that's got to be kept, that we're not saying no, we're saying when the time's right, the facility's right, and everything, that we're still looking at it. And in the meantime, we've got to come up with even better things for our community. Oh, it's this one now. That's the long one. It's gone down to this. That we progress this, because in my opinion, there isn't enough toilets in Maidstone. And if you've got a problem and you need to use a toilet regularly, then I don't see many of these that let people have that facility. So I will keep on about it, but not for Denise Joy, but for my residents that say, we are the county town, why haven't we got toilets? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pearl, did you indicate? I'm sorry, what did you say? All right, I'll take Councillor Burton then, who was next.
I was going to, if I may, or were you going elsewhere? Sorry.
No.
Okay, sorry. I was going to offer an amendment to that option 3 that might help Councillor Joy put her hand in the air, which would be to add something on the end of, so you've got, therefore the council would continue to deliver and improve upon the community toilet scheme, And in future, consider the possibility of inclusion of public conveniences where new development occurs in the town centre.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Ring on that one. Okay, I've got Councillor Robertson next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As people have said, we have debated this subject for many, many years, and I think we should still have the aspiration of having a proper state-of-the-art public toilet in Maidstone. After all, we are trying to encourage tourists into the town, and if you've got a coach load of people coming into the town, the minute they get off the coach, what do they want to do? Go to the loo. And it is important. I mean, I've been really disappointed that we haven't been able to do anything with the market buildings facility, because, as you know, we did have a toilet there, but that's been closed. So I'd just like to hear from the officers, you know, what the position is and what future there is in actually getting the market buildings toilet back into operation, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, only about half an hour before the committee started, was able to get into market buildings. It was closed because there was antisocial behaviour. It is tucked away, and it's not on a main thoroughfare of footfall. Also, an inspection today, it needs a hell of a lot of work. There will be no room for a change in places toilet, which I know a lot of people want, and it will need a hell of a lot of work. I'd also say you also bookend at market buildings by the Muggletons, and the Royal Star is also part of the scheme. So I think the question's got to be asked, why do we want to pay a lot of money for a toilet when there is actually two toilets no more than 30 metres either side? And if I could just touch on the community toilet scheme, we will always look at the community toilet scheme to improve it. But of course we're always restricted about what provisions out there being provided by retailers. But we will continuously look at opportunities to add new toilets to the scheme. And actually, when toilets don't hit the mark, we'll remove them. And that's one of the reasons why we came from 15 to 9. So we will continually look at the community toilet scheme, and we always have. And, you know, in my opinion, market buildings, you know, as I said, it needs a hell of a lot of investment, and I still don't think it would be suitable after that either.
Okay. Yeah, you want to come back? Certainly.
Yeah. I mean, people have mentioned the possibility of incorporating new public toilets in new developments, and I just hope that we can progress that in some way, because, you know, they are badly needed.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl.
I just sort of wish to sort of take issue with this point that public toilets are, well, badly needed. If you come into Maidstone to shop or to work or to eat or to visit a museum or visit the theatre, there's usually a toilet there. And as we talked about, you know, supplementary to that, we have the community toilet scheme. I'm just wondering who it is we're trying to build facilities for, who isn't coming in to use any of those facilities and who can't get past sort of Sharon at the Albion to go and use the toilet there. And I just keep hearing the phrase antisocial behaviour, you know, in this report and in examples given, and it concerns me we'd be spending an awful lot of money in order to create potentially somewhere that can be used as, you know, for, you know, as a hub for further antisocial behaviour. And we are the county town of Kent, and it would help if we had fewer of the antisocial element on our street, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl has mentioned a couple of the points I was going to say, but just anecdotally, I suppose, as well, I visit a lot of towns across the southeast in my day job, and really, compared to Chelmsford, Colchester, Brentwood, place I've been today, actually, we don't do too bad, I think, for a size of town compared to how many toilets we have available to people. I think if we were to do a comparison, if we really wanted to see how good we're doing, I think we'd actually be doing pretty well. You know, I walked around Colchester town centre all day and there isn't anywhere that convenient to go. As a travelling sales rep, it's a bit of a bane in my life. So, but I do like coming to Maidstone for that. Cheers.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, oh, Councillor Webb.
Yeah, something was brought up about market buildings being right near Muggleton and the Royal Arcade, which have got facilities in already. But if you come in from the south of Maidstone, and I always park in the Mill Street car park behind the Carriage Museum, about, I don't know, 20 years ago or something, there always used to be a facility in the Palace Avenue car park. And that was a portable sort of cabin thing. You're sort of talking about new locations for things. There's sort of the possibility that we freeze and stake something there that used to have a site. And then that is close by to the Archbishop's Palace or the sort of the southern parts and the Carriage Museum. There's nothing, looking at the sheet down here, there's nothing down that way that we could have 4 toilet facilities if people are going that way. So, just sort of thinking, is that a possible location for something?
Sorry, are we going to go back to
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah, we did look at that. Actually, parking spaces creates great revenue. If we wanted a decent toilet, not only would we be looking at those costs in this report, we'll actually be looking at additional costs for lost revenue on the car parking spaces as well.
Okay, Councillor Ring, did you want to?
Yes, I just wanted to let Councillor Webb know that the main trouble with those toilets were you couldn't go in and use them sometimes because the homeless people were in there keeping out of the rain or washing or cleaning their clothes, bless them. So there's been often that I haven't been able to use that toilet. In that. Being next to a police station doesn't mean anything.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, I'll give you my thoughts, if I may. Personally, I would prefer option 2, because it allows us to explore the actual, what we're talking about at the moment, to carry it forward. However, I do get the feeling in the room where people are coming from. If I went and knocked on a door at election time or any time, and I knocked and I was canvassing, I would say, what was your top priority would be with residents, and they would say, my bins, my street lights, and a public loo in town. I can't find a toilet. And that is and we have a growing elderly population. So I still think there is a problem with it as well. That's what I pick up. Personally, I would be happy for this to go to PNR, because PNR can say, oh, that's too much money. So we're in the same situation we were spoken about before. But obviously the location is very important. It's probably, if you read all through this, take the money thing out of it, location is the most important thing. We spent, from a value point of view, let's put it like that, we spent millions and millions of pounds on the granite all the way through here, right, to improve the town, the look, the environment, enhance the shopping experience, yeah? But if you look at the costs involved in this and the assistance it will give many, many visitors and residents, it would really boost the town centre, in my view. But that's, all right, that's my personal opinion on it. As I've mentioned before, but the changing places, I would still like to be promoting a changing place. As I said before, they've got them in Tunbridge Wells, they've got them in Canterbury, etc. And I think that is very, very important, because we're completely disadvantaging some members of society. It's a shame about the market buildings, as Councillor Ring knows. I went round there and I got the numbers for it a couple of years ago and the costs, and I completely understand where officers are coming from. If there's an opportunity in future that we can do something down there, I'd love to change that place around a lot, actually, including the theatre, but the actual setup of it all, and it obviously wasn't built for what we've got at the moment down there. One of the things that... no, I will say this first. I would support a paid loo and a manned loo, and I'd have it as a pay-as-you-go thing, yeah? So you... No, but I'm only joking there. But basically, I would support a manned loo, and people would pay for it. There's no problem. 20, 30, 40, 50 people would pay for it. And the other thing is, recently we've just increased the amount of use on Jubilee Square for the market. I forget the amount of days now, but it was 50, 60 years ago. 50, 60 days a year, I believe, and that's now gone up to 160 or something in that region. I can't remember the exact number. So the amount of use that we're going to have just outside this door is going... There are going to be a lot of people out there on a more regular basis. So again, my argument is that we would need something in the centre fairly soon, and I'll leave you to that. But okay. Right, thank you very much, everybody. I had Councillor Burton, he proposed option 3 with the addition that it was going to, and that we would improve upon the community toilet scheme.
If I may, Chairman, there was another addition as well, that we would also explore the option of including public conveniences in any further town centre development.
Right. That's fine. Does everybody okay with that? Well, could I ask Jen's opinion on that one, please?
I think that makes sense to indicate that that's... I mean, it's those two and Maidstone East are the 3 developments that are coming up, so we should highlight them as priority.
Yeah.
Can we also add on the community toilet scheme an annual review? You know, just have to see what's constantly out there every year and see how... We're not going to be able to do anything. Sorry. Yeah.
We're not going to be able to do anything until we've got somewhere where someone's got the money to put in brand new toilets. And for security reasons, at the station and at the mall would be the best security that we could ask for, without having to find extra cameras to keep an eye on these places.
Okay. Thanks. Councillor Burton, did you want to come in?
If I may, Chair, as the person putting the amendment down, whilst I can understand the benefit of pinpointing particular developments that you might want, I wonder whether we restrict our options a little. And okay, so the 2 most obvious ones have been highlighted here, but there's a third, and it actually came out of something that Councillor Robertson was saying. If you get a coach into town, what do you want to do? You want to get off, use the loo. We're looking at plans to potentially move and revamp or do something different to our bus station. So I do wonder whether restricting what we say, I think, you know, new town centre developments might be the better way forward.
Yeah.
Apologies, I was assuming bus station when I said station, hence I said East, Maidstone East as well. So yeah, bus station, Maidstone East, and...
Yeah, okay. Right. So is everybody happy with Councillor Burton's amendment on option 3, seconded by Councillor Ring? Okay. Those for the motion? Those against? Those abstaining?
Point of order, Chair, and no one's going to like me for this. We've not now got to vote on the substantive as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay, we're moving to part 2 now, please. Sorry.
We have to vote on the substantive motion. We voted to include the amendment, so as a point of order. I read that little couple of page document called the Constitution. Great read.
Right, okay, so we're voting on the substantive motion. Those for? Those against? Those abstaining? Right, thank you very much. Thank you for the reminder. It's all about teamwork, you know. Right, thank you. Yeah, we move now to part 2, where we lock the door and turn the webcast off.